A bombshell report by the DOJ Inspector General blasting Andrew McCabe for misleading investigators, even revealing a growing rift with his former boss, James Comey.
And just moments ago, President Trump tweeting, quote, "The big questions in Comey's badly reviewed book aren't answered, like how come he gave up classified information, jail? Why did he lie to Congress, jail? Why did the DNC refuse to give server to the FBI? Why didn't they take it? And why the phony memos, McCabe $700,000 and more?"
Fox News contributor and investigative journalist Sara Carter is here to weigh in. Sara, good morning.
Hey, Sara.
Good morning.
So, Sara, all fair questions. I mean, he asked, why did they get away with things that regular people never would?
Well, because of partisan politics. And, you know, I would take it one step further than what President Trump said, you know, that he would go down as the worst FBI director in history. I hear that from FBI agents, former agents, current agents who are so angry. And former FBI Director James Comey should be ashamed of himself. He played partisan politics. He was probably one of the worst leaders. He took the entire 7th floor into this partisan investigation. I mean, look, the IG report on McCabe is just one of multiple reports that are going to come out. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And what we've seen in McCabe's report, how he lied under oath, how he played partisan politics, even to the point where Comey wouldn't even let him into meetings because he didn't want him there and he was angry and had to push him out. But Comey himself was doing the same thing. Not only was McCabe leaking, but look, Comey leaked 7 memos to the professor, to his friend, 4 of which were classified. Those were classified memos. They belonged to the FBI. I think we're going to hear a lot more about that in the upcoming IG reports. Right. And one which is coming out in May, actually, on the Hillary Clinton investigation.
But you think about the timing of this, Sara. All of these nuggets are beginning to come out from these investigations and from this IG report. We'll hear more as we go. But the timing of James Comey's book, he is now ready for his close-up, has that big interview on ABC later tonight. His book is out on Tuesday. You can only imagine members of the DOJ how frustrated they must be, as there's already a huge lack of trust in this country with that department.
There's an enormous lack of trust right now, and it's so concerning because one of the things FBI Director Christopher Wray is going to have to do, he's really going to have to take a step away from any kind of partisan politics or even trying to protect those within the FBI. He's going to have to come out. He's going to have to clean house. The DOJ is going to have to do the same thing. Everybody is going to have to put their cards out on the table, all the evidence before the American people and before Congress so that they can conduct this investigation fairly. Look, American people are not stupid. We knew what was going on. Once this started to unravel, it unraveled quickly, and it's still unraveling. I've been told there's so much information out there that we still haven't been privy to that's going to be explosive.
Sara, when we learn more about Attorney General Lynch, Comey throws Lynch under the bus in this book. There's not much new there, but that is new. What do you know?
Look, there was evidence that he presented, and I wrote about this last year, that when he was the FBI director, he had gone to Loretta Lynch. He had shown her some documentation, and what I was told was that there was steely silence between the two, and that she asked him to leave the office. She just basically said leave. Now, this is coming from numerous sources. What that evidence is, I would like to see. I think Congress deserves to see that. There was partisan politics here to such an extreme because he did say one thing that was true. They all believed Hillary Clinton was going to win. And that should frighten everyone. That the FBI, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, which is supposed to be objective, was playing this political game, leaking disinformation to the American public. And I want to say one more thing.
Bingo.
When he went to President-elect Trump with the dossier, and he didn't tell him that Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC was paying for it, that's incredible. That is really incredible. He was the president-elect. He should have known that his opponents were paying for that.
Yeah, and that was more to come.
Yeah, a lot more to come, as you say, Sara. Always good to have you on.
Thanks, Sara.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.
Sunday morning Futures host Maria Bartiromo will be interviewing the Judiciary Committee chair this morning, and she joins us now. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning, guys. Great to see you.
So much to get to, Maria.
It really is.
Unbelievable.
You know, I think once these memos from Comey went to this professor and then to the New York Times, you would think that Congress should be able to see them.
Yes.
Incredibly, Congress has not seen these memos. That's point number one. Point number two is, why did Jim Comey take so many memos about about President Trump, then President-elect or candidate Trump, and no memos about Hillary Clinton. Is that extraordinary? And not even her interview right before, and the exoneration note was already written, but not even that was recorded and on.
So you're going to have Goodlatte on your show, head of the House Judiciary Committee. What a great person to have on with all of this going. What are you going to ask?
3 weeks ago, Bob Goodlatte broke the news on this on Sunday Morning Futures that he was going to subpoena for the documents. They have requested 1.2 million documents. They've only gotten 3,000. Now the FBI says they sent another 1,000, so 4,000 documents out of 1.2 million. The next question for Bob Goodlatte is, where do you go from here? How are you going to get these documents? And the next step, frankly, is putting them in contempt of Congress with potential impeachment. And what does that mean? That means you are impeaching senior members of the Department of Justice, including Rod Rosenstein, I guess. I don't know where this goes, but they're getting stonewalled now going on a year.
Yeah, but
for these
they have
documents.
security clearance. You think about Goodlatte, you think about Nunes. All these guys have clearances. So why is it taking so long to get these documents? And much of them are redacted, as you said.
Exactly. And the question is, what are you hiding, FBI, DOJ?
What
that
is their
has to be the
rationale?
question.
What are they saying publicly as to what? What are they saying?
They're saying that there's a lot of information and they have to go through it and they have to redact.
Wait, the Comey memos? I mean, they're not long.
Well, these are two different stories that we're talking about. Comey memos, as well as the 1.2 million documents that the Judiciary has requested. No, the Comey memos are not saying anything. I mean, Jim Comey is all over TV, and he's going to do this interview tonight with Stephanopoulos about what he thinks about Trump based on these memos, and Congress hasn't seen the memos. It's extraordinary. By the way, I just want to come back to something you said, security clearance. Isn't it outrageous that people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who have clear
They're
bias,
still there, by the way.
and they have security clearance, so they can go and put anybody's name in there and have all the information that they want, data on people. They have security clearance, even though they were demoted.
And also on the show, you've got Congressman Ratcliffe, who, if I'm correct, has actually seen the Comey memos, not able to take notes, not able to take a copy, but he's seen it?
He sure has. He's only one of 3 congressmen who has seen the underlying data here. So we're going to talk with Congressman Ratcliffe about that, and also what he's expecting to come from the rest of the IG report. This is not only it. This is just about McCabe. But I think after this whole Comey blitz, you're going to hear a lot about Jim Comey from the Inspector General, as well as you're going to hear about the handling of the Clinton Foundation.
Well, James Comey even hinted in the book that there's more to come about Loretta Lynch that could come from this IG report.
They're all pointing at each other right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Comey to McCabe to Lynch.
This phone call that Comey said that McCabe said was so aggressive from the Assistant Attorney General, basically telling him to shut down the investigation, which some people say he did move to shut down the investigation.
All right.
So much to get to.
We'll
A
be
lot to
watching.
get to.
Oof.
We're
We're
fired
just
up.
warming you up.
Thank you.
10 minutes,
Thank
here
you.
comes Maria. Don't miss it.
Good to see you, Maria.
All right.
In New York City, the Next Revolution host Steve Hilton served as a strategy director to former Prime Minister David Cameron, and he is on the couch. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Good to
You've got
see you
a
in the
great
flesh.
program tonight.
So the James Comey Media Blitz begins tonight
Yeah.
on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. And you have the show, The Next Revolution, on at 9 with a special tonight, the trial of James Comey. I can only imagine the research you and your producers have put into the show tonight. I wonder what the biggest takeaway you have from all of this.
The real point here is that underneath all the politics and the personal insults and the attacks, there are serious grounds to think that James Comey personally committed federal crimes. And that's really important to investigate, because if you've got our most senior law enforcement officials potentially committing crimes and then nothing happening about it, that undermines our whole democracy and the rule of law. So it's really important we investigate. We're going to be very specific. We've got lawyers on both sides. We've got a top team of legal experts.
Well, that's the thing. This is someone who is loved and very hated by both sides of the political aisle. We had Lanny Davis on,
Exactly.
a former special counsel to Bill Clinton, and had some very tough things to say about James Comey. So it comes from both sides of the aisle.
That's exactly right, and that's why we're going to be really forensic. We're going to be looking at the specific statutes, what the language says, compare it to his behaviour, and say, look, should this guy actually be investigated and charged with actual crimes? That's the point of tonight's show.
Steve, will you get into a little bit of, Comey has a book coming out while an investigation is going on, and possibly puts himself in jeopardy from what he does on this media blitz tour, and perhaps what comes out of your show tonight.
Well, that's exactly right, and it's so inappropriate, isn't it, to be coming up with this gossipy revenge attack on President Trump that actually includes material that is relevant to an ongoing investigation. It is just unbelievable that he's done this. But as I say, it's has he committed crimes? That's the real question.
And you have to get into the details in order to determine
exactly. And once all this passes, the media blitz is gone, you're still left with the question, did our most senior law enforcement official commit federal crimes? And if he did, what's going to be done about it?
Well, that is a great tease for your show tonight. The Next Revolution on at 9 p.m. Eastern here on the Fox News Channel.
We never encourage you to change the channel.
Exactly.
But if you do watch this before at 9 o'clock, and you'll know the real news.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve, good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
Good Sunday morning, everybody. President Trump takes to Twitter this morning as James Comey kicks off the PR blitz for his tell-all book. The Justice Department's internal watchdog says former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe lied to investigators. And America's future strategy in Syria in the spotlight. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. President Trump unleashes on Twitter as Jim Comey's new book is about to hit bookshelves. Some powerful lawmakers are asking why Congress and the public have not seen or get access to the same memos the former head of the FBI used to write the tell-all book. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte and former Attorney General Michael Mukasey will weigh in live this morning with me. There's a scathing new report issued of the DOJ's Inspector General Friday night. The IG report is dropped on Andrew McCabe misleading investigators about the unauthorized disclosure of information. The reaction from Congressman John Ratcliffe this morning coming up. And the U.S. and its allies send Damascus a message after President Bashar al-Assad launched a chemical attack on his own people. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce on America's next steps in Syria as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. Brand new reaction this morning from President Trump to the upcoming tell-all book by former FBI Director James Comey. As Comey kicks off a tour promoting his book ahead of its release this Tuesday, the president today tweeted this: "I never asked Comey for personal loyalty. I hardly even knew this guy. Just another of his many lies. His memos are self-serving and fake. My next guest is one of 3 GOP congressional chairmen requesting the detailed memos Comey says he kept after encounters with President Trump. They set a deadline for tomorrow, April 16th. Joining me right now is Republican Congressman Bob Goodlatte, who is also the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
It's great to be with you, Maria.
Let's talk about those memos. I have the letter in front of me that you sent to Rod Rosenstein, saying that you're requesting the Department of Justice make copies of the Comey memos available immediately, no later than the close of business this Monday. Of course, we know that Jim Comey passed some of those memos to his friend, a professor, and then the New York Times. Tell us what you're looking to receive here.
Well, we're looking to receive the unredacted Comey memos so that we have the opportunity to see what Mr. Comey is telling the people in his book compared to what is occurring in terms of his recounting of his meetings with the president earlier last year. It's very important that the American people get to hear the whole story. Mr. Comey is out aggrandizing himself. He's out for revenge, I would say. When he talks about a higher justice, he's really talking about a higher view of himself than I think the American people have, but they need to have all the facts, and the Comey memos certainly play a part of that. These are in the possession of the Department of Justice and Special Counsel Mueller, and there's absolutely no reason why they should not be made available. There's no legal principle to not make them available to the Congress.
Well, Congressman, 3 weeks ago you appeared on this program and you broke the news that you would in fact subpoena the Department of Justice, the FBI, if you did not receive the 1.2 million documents that you had requested. At that time, you and your colleagues had been given 3,000 documents out of the 1.2 million documents. How many of those have you received at this point?
We have not received very many of those documents, and as you know, we issued the subpoena, and we have had some progress because the Department of Justice appointed, the Attorney General Sessions appointed John Losh, who is the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, specifically charged with producing those documents. I've had 2 meetings with Mr. Losh so far. My staff have had additional meetings, and I believe that we're very close to being able to get access to those documents later this week.
But, Congressman, I mean, with all due respect, what are you going to do? I mean, you're looking for the Comey memos. The deadline is tomorrow. You've put a deadline in place to get these 1.2 million documents. You've only received 3,000 or 4,000 of those 1.2 million documents. You've said that if we don't get these documents, we're going to move toward contempt of Congress. What does that mean, and is that realistic? I mean, if you move to contempt of, is that the next step, by the way? Or if you don't get these documents, what are you going to do?
Well, we have additional steps we can take, and we will continue to do that. There's a lot of pressure on the Federal Bureau of Investigation and on the Department of Justice to produce these documents. I think the fact that they've now appointed 2 United States attorneys, one to oversee the investigation from outside of the main Department of Justice. I still think we need a special counsel into what my committee and Chairman Gowdy's committee are looking into with regard to how the FBI handled investigations into Hillary Clinton and into both campaigns in 2016 and into 2017. We have made progress in that regard. Now we have a new United States attorney overseeing the production of these documents. We don't have the documents yet. We don't have access to the documents, but I believe we will have them very soon based upon the discussions that we're undertaking. If we do not, we are prepared to take additional steps. And I believe that people in the administration very much want to have the Congress get these documents so that we can, A, conduct our investigation, but B, also recognize the right of the Congress and the American people to have access to information so that these investigations, this oversight can be conducted.
And one of those tools, as you've said in the past, would be putting them in contempt of Congress with eventually impeachment proceedings. Wouldn't that effectively mean that you would look to fire or impeach certain people of the Department of Justice, senior people like Rod Rosenstein? Are you prepared to go as far as firing Rod Rosenstein?
All of those tools are on the table, but I don't think we should say what we're going to do until we actually reach a decision that we have to do it. But we have shown a willingness to issue subpoenas and to take our case to the Attorney General of the United States and to take our case to the American people. We'll continue to do that. The Congress is entitled to these documents, and we'll get them.
Congressman, I have here the Office of the Inspector General IG report, or the beginning or part of the IG report that was dropped late Friday night. Can you talk to us about this? This is the internal watchdog. Of course, this is about McCABE, Andrew McCABE, misleading investigators and his former boss, Jim Comey, and the leaks to the media regarding an investigation of the Clinton Foundation. What struck you most? What was most important out of this IG report, which was dropped on Friday night?
Well, first of all, I think the Inspector General's report clearly confirms the decision within the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to fire the Deputy Director of the FBI, Mr. McCabe. It's very unfortunate that a long career on the part of Mr. McCabe would end in the fashion that it did, but based upon this report and the original findings by the Office of Professional Responsibility, by the way, and not a political decision, the Office of Professional Responsibility found that Mr. McCabe took inappropriate actions and then lied about them. And as a result of that, I think it's very important that the Inspector General report is out there now and confirms that the correct decision was made to remove him from office.
So in terms of Andrew McCabe lying 3 times under oath, which is what we learned from this report from the Inspector General, there's also part of this report detailing a phone call which Andrew McCabe took from a higher up at the Department of Justice, the Assistant Attorney General. And he said that that was the most aggressive call he had ever received, where he had to ask that person, are you asking me to shut down this investigation of the Clinton Foundation? Tell us about that. I mean, does that indicate that this goes higher up than we knew in terms of into the Obama administration?
Well, it may very well go higher up. It may even go all the way into the Obama White House. That's why it is so important that the investigation that we launched last fall into how the FBI and the Department of Justice handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation, and the connection between that and how they launched an investigation into the Trump campaign that carried on into 2017 when the president actually took office. The contrast between how the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation handled the investigation into all the aspects of what was going on with Hillary Clinton, with her emails, with the Clinton Foundation, and so on. Bending over backwards to not prosecute, to not investigate properly, to not continue to investigate is very disturbing when you compare that to the page-struck email and texts which indicate very strongly an extreme bias against the Trump campaign and President Trump and his administration.
That's right.
We cannot have this persist. We certainly can't have it go into the next presidential election in 2020. The American people deserve better from America's premier law enforcement organization. And by the way, they get that from tens of thousands of rank-and-file FBI personnel who every day keep us safe, fight terrorism, solve crimes. They're doing their job, and they deserve better than to be besmirched by several people at the top of that organization who, thankfully, like Mr. Comey, are no longer, most of them are no longer there.
There may not be there, but many of them are still there in different positions, and they still have security clearances. Isn't that right, Congressman?
That is right, and those that are still there, based upon information I've seen, should be removed, and I hope that the Department and the Bureau are taking the steps necessary to finish that job, because it is very important that justice be served, and people who are not serving justice should not be in the Department of Justice or the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Congressman, we're going to take a short break. I want to ask you about criminal referrals when we come right back. Congressman Goodlatte, stay with us. We'll be right back. Then we'll talk with Congressman John Ratcliffe and Congressman Ed Royce on America's future role in Syria. Follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to hear from our guests this morning as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. Welcome back, and we are back with Virginia Congressman Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, just a few days after the Inspector General dropped the beginning of the Inspector General report, which has been highly anticipated. And this part of the report, Congressman, is dealing with Andrew McCabe and how he lied on 4 different occasions, 3 times under oath. It appears now that McCabe and Comey and Loretta Lynch are contradicting each other in terms of what went on. A moment ago, we were talking about that phone call that Andrew McCabe discussed, having heard from senior Attorney General assistants about the Clinton investigation. And you said this may very well go higher up into the Obama White House. What do you expect?
Well, I don't want to say what I expect. I want to say that this investigation needs to be thoroughly pursued within the Department of Justice, within the Federal Bureau of Investigation under its new leadership with Christopher Wray, by the outside United States Attorney, Mr. Huber from Utah, outside of Maine Justice, who's been appointed by Attorney General Sessions to look into this, and by the United States Congress. And it's why we need to have access to those documents. And certainly the United States Attorney can take the appropriate steps to pursue appropriate criminal action if it is warranted.
Are there criminal referrals within this IG report?
I do not know the answer to that, but certainly those examining the report can make a determination whether or not they should pursue that, regardless of whether or not the Inspector General believes that to be the case. They can take his information, the information they have themselves, and make the appropriate decision to do that. And they should if the Inspector General and or the outside United States Attorney and the Department of Justice itself believes that Mr. McCabe took steps that violated the law.
Well, I mean, what I'm asking really is the American people want to know, where is this going? You know, we know now that the Inspector General says that Andrew McCabe lied under oath. And we know now that he was overseeing the Clinton investigation as well as the Trump investigation up until a week before the election. We know that there was a conflict with his wife, having received hundreds of thousands of dollars before that in her failed bid for a state Senate seat. So where does this go? I mean, will people feel like there was accountability? Because we know plenty of other people who have gone to jail for lying under oath, which is a felony.
Well, well, you're absolutely right, Maria, and the fact of the matter is that the Department of Justice should pursue the truth wherever it leads them and should draw the appropriate conclusions about whether or not Mr. McCabe committed perjury or violated some other law that requires action be taken in that regard. And I certainly support continuing this investigation on their part, because that's exactly what we're trying to do in the House of Representatives, considering the fact that nothing was done during the Obama years, and very little was done at the beginning of this administration to pursue these facts. And the fact that we have persisted in this regard, and the department is waking up to the reality that serious damage has been done to the important reputation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that's all a part of restoring the American people's trust in the premier law enforcement organization of the country.
And yet, astoundingly, all of this has occurred on Jim Comey's watch, and he right now is on a book tour talking about his new book, talking about his criticism of President Trump, and very few questions about his performance and his underlings' performance, like Andrew McCabe, and their complicit abuse of power.
Again, that's the reason why Chairman Gowdy and I have launched this investigation between the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight and Government Reform Committee into what happened in the leadership of the FBI during the 2016 election. And Democrats and independents, everyone, American people should be very concerned about the matters that were undertaken at that time. And Democrats should be extremely concerned about the fact that Mr. Comey announced publicly a week or 10 days before the election that he was reopening the investigation. He could have informed people in the Congress prior to reopening that investigation that he was going to do so, and then the facts could have come out after the election. But if I were a Democrat, I'd be very disturbed about the fact that he made that decision. I think his book is going to confirm that he took inappropriate steps here, and that Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who's the person who actually made the decision to terminate Mr. Comey, made the correct decision.
All right, we will leave it there. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
We appreciate it. More on the Jim Comey book with House Judiciary Committee member John Ratcliffe of Texas. He will join me next to discuss the new report from the Department of Justice detailing its reasons behind the firing of former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and how this plays into the internal Justice Department investigation on the Bureau's actions leading up to the 2016 election. That and what should we expect coming up from the rest of this IG report. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And happy Sunday. Welcome back to Sunday Morning Futures. We will get reaction to the latest on the U.S. response in Syria in just a moment. But we want to get back to where we left off on that IG report, the Justice Department's internal watchdog on former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Joining me now to weigh in is Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe, who's also a member of both the House Judiciary Committee and the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet, Maria. Thanks for having me on.
And we want to talk to you because you're one of only three lawmakers who have actually seen the raw intelligence behind the Nunes memo on alleging the surveillance abuses at the FBI. What can you tell us in terms of the IG report, the beginning of the IG report that was dropped on Friday night? What struck you?
I think the most important takeaway is that the firing of Andrew McCabe was justified. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. The number 2 person at the premier law enforcement agency in the world, the FBI, lied and was less than truthful, sometimes under oath. I think it's important to underscore that that decision was the appropriate one. I think the other important takeaway for the American people is it shows that our congressional investigations into this matter are justified. Remember, Adam Schiff and others were wagging their finger at me and other members for maligning the character of certain FBI and Department of Justice officials. Listen, I love the Department of Justice. I wanted Adam Schiff to be right, but he wasn't. Look at the extraordinary circumstances of what the American people have seen in the last week. If they've turned on their TVs or read a newspaper, they've seen the FBI director, former director Comey, contradicting his deputy, Andrew McCabe, both of them contradicting each other under oath. You've seen Jim Comey contradicting the former Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch, in recorded and televised interviews. And you've seen Jim Comey contradicting himself with respect to his congressional testimony and now some of the things that he's saying in interviews regarding his book tour. So, you know, all of this is extraordinarily inappropriate. It's sad. It's disappointing. It's painful. But it shows that it's important for us to get to the bottom of this and for these congressional investigations to continue so that we can hold people accountable. I think Andrew McCabe is being held accountable, and I think others need to be as well.
Are there criminal referrals here? Where is this going?
Well, we'll see. You know, we're waiting for the rest of the Inspector General's report. Very clearly, what has been outlined is that Andrew McCabe, according to FBI's own investigators, was less than truthful under oath. The same thing that other folks like Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos and Rick Gates are currently being charged for. So you would expect that Andrew McCabe would be treated the same under the law. I do expect that the next part of the Inspector General report will highlight additional misconduct at the FBI and the Department of Justice, and hopefully everyone will be treated equally under the law as we get those revelations.
Meanwhile, he is on this book tour, and he's trashing Trump in every interview. Your reaction to a former FBI director writing a book with these Comey memos, talking about these memos he took on then candidate Trump?
Well, the funny thing about every Jim Comey story is that the starring role and the hero in the end is always the same. It's always Jim Comey. He's always in some sort of tortured matrix to save us all.
Right.
Problem is, he's not in the Justice League. He's in the justice system. And I think it's a betrayal of the oath that he took to be monetizing that and publicly talking about things that are frankly beneath the dignity of the office that he held. But more importantly, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the decisions that he made have really come with some extraordinarily grave consequences for our national security. Jim Comey's the one person in the history of the United States to simultaneously act as the FBI director, investigating what Hillary Clinton did under the Espionage Act, as the Attorney General exercising prosecutorial discretion. He acted as a member of Congress by adding elements to the statute,
right.
The Espionage Act, and he acted as a Supreme Court justice in interpreting what the law should be. You know, those kinds of things, superheroes do that in the movie, but in real life, we respect the separation of powers, and I think that's a system that he did not follow the rules that he should have, and I think that's the oath that he betrayed to the American people. And again, that has come with grave national security consequences, Maria.
Congressman, I want to ask you 2 other pieces of business, certainly as it relates to national security and the Homeland, you being on the Homeland Security Committee. Should we be worried, given the fact that the president has called out Russia, he has called out Tehran on the heels of the strikes against Syria?
Well, you know, with respect to Russia, I think they were warned in advance of this attack. I've seen the words that they're going to respond and their fears of retaliation. I wouldn't expect any military response against either opposition forces in Syria or against our own special forces in the region. I'd be surprised if they took that action. This is not the old Soviet Union. They can't go toe-to-toe with us militarily. And economically, they really can't do anything to us either. We're talking about a Russian economy that's smaller than the economy of my home state, the state of Texas. But I do think where we are vulnerable is in cyberspace. DDoS attacks or malicious cyber attacks are something the Russians or the Iranians could do in retaliation. So I think that the United States and our allies like Great Britain and France would be vulnerable there, and there has been some, frankly, chatter with respect to potential attacks against the UK in particular already. But, Maria, some risks are worth taking, and trying to prevent the use of chemical weapons anywhere in the world, I think, is one of those risks.
Congressman, real quick before you go, we know that Paul Ryan is stepping down as Speaker of the House. Who will you support as the next Speaker?
Well, first of all, I'm less concerned about who the next Speaker is. I'm more concerned about what the next Speaker is. I want the next Speaker to be a Republican. But Republicans are all lining up. I was glad this week to see, Paul Ryan did a great job. He has endorsed Kevin McCarthy, and Steve Scalise has endorsed Kevin McCarthy. Now, I hate to punish Kevin with the most difficult and perhaps worst job in Washington, but I know that he'd be up to the task, and I think it's important that Republicans be unified as we head into the midterms with respect to that. But again, our focus needs to be on making sure that the next Speaker is a Republican.
Congressman, thank you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good to see you, sir.
Bet. Always
Congressman
great.
John Ratcliffe. Stay with us. More from Michael Mukasey up next. Welcome back. President Trump this morning unleashing a flurry of tweets slamming former FBI Director Jim Comey. In one tweet, the president says this: "Slippery James Comey, a man who always ends up badly and out of whack. He is not smart. Will go down as the worst FBI director in history by far." It comes as Comey gets ready to release a new tell-all book this week, which will be dropped on Tuesday. Joining me right now is Michael Mukasey. He's a former attorney general under the George W. Bush administration, a former federal judge and partner at DeBossi. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
So this is all quite extraordinary, isn't it, Judge? I mean, give me your take. Here we have Jim Comey out with this book talking about his time at the FBI at the same time that congressional leadership is asking for documents that they haven't received yet pertaining to the FBI's handling of the Clinton investigation as well as the Trump administration. Your reaction?
Well, there are a couple of issues raised by that. Number one, there are guidelines, publication guidelines for people who work at the FBI. And the first publication guideline is that you're not supposed to write about the substantive issues in pending open investigations. That seems to have been violated with Mr. Comey's book. But beyond that, I think that it bears a good long look into how he came to drop the charges with respect to Hillary Clinton. As your last guest pointed out, he was acting in several capacities, most of them unauthorized in doing that. But there are a couple of clues in plain view that really need to be followed. Number one, President Obama communicated with Hillary Clinton on her server. We know that because he had a code name. And his emails were discovered and would have been discovered had the investigation of her continued. When the president went on television and said that she hadn't done anything wrong, did Jim Comey take that as an indication that he should find that there was an added element in the statute and therefore that he shouldn't bring a prosecution? I think that bears following up.
Well, they also, we should point out, changed the language of what, in fact, Hillary Clinton had done. Changing the language really changed the specific situation in terms of her handling of her emails. Isn't that right?
Correct. And they also he also misstated whether people had ever been prosecuted for doing what she did. He claimed that he hadn't found any cases at the Justice Department. Whether he found any cases or not, the fact is that there were many people in the military who were prosecuted under the identical statute, who not only suffered sanctions, but were actually imprisoned for doing actually a lot less than she did.
So there will be more to come from the Inspector General with regard to the Hillary Clinton email investigation, and that will be coming out within the month. What struck you about what we've learned so far from the Inspector General about Andrew McCabe in this most recent drop on Friday night?
Well, I thought the statement that he had been less than candid, i.e. lied, no fewer than 4 times, a couple of them under oath, was really pretty striking, particularly for someone who has pretended to be a pillar of virtue and who has attracted charitable contributions or contributions to a defense fund.
I mean, this is all pretty extraordinary. As a former Attorney General yourself, when you see these contradictions between former Attorney General Loretta Lynch and Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, and these texts, what do you say is going on or has taken place?
There's a lot that I don't know, but there's also a lot that the rest of us don't know. And what I think is appropriate is the investigation by Mr. Huber in Utah and a full investigation by Congress, which ought to do its job and really tease out all of the details.
All right, we will leave it there. Michael Mukasey, always a pleasure to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you.